everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm going to be taking your questions on Seafoam, flipping cars, dead radios, and more. This is episode 136 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, in order to get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com, and be sure to put question for Charles in the subject. Also, if you guys could please ask the question right at the top, hit the enter button a couple of times, then give me all the details after that. That's so much easier for me to take the question out and answer it on a show like this, answer it on a quick video, or even simply just email you back rather than having to read 4 paragraphs just to unearth the question that you're trying to ask. It will help me do a better job and a faster job of answering questions for you guys. All right, before I get to your questions, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals on a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, AC parts, even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi DSG transmissions. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. All right, first one comes from Ian. I have a 2007 GLI with a DSG. I would like to know what are the differences, upgrades, and fixes between the FSI and the TSI. So these are both direct injection 2-liter turbocharged engines. The FSI is the first generation, the TSI is the second generation. The FSI started in like 2006 and went to early 2008. Then the TSI was from 2008 and a half, roughly, until now it's still in the Tiguan. There are also other variants of that engine as well that are out. There's a 1.8 turbo that's similar. There's a couple of 2-liter turbos that are similar, but we're kind of focusing on like the BPY engine as well as the CCTA engine. There are actually quite a few differences between the two engines. The biggest one being that the FSI is a timing belt driven, and it does have a chain connecting the 2 camshafts at the back of the engine. The TSI, on the other hand, is straight timing chain driven. We have 3 chains on the TSI engine, we have 1 on the FSI engine. Also a bunch of other differences. The intake manifolds are different, the water pump setup is different. It's a very similar engine, but it is quite a bit different engine. As far as upgrades go, it's all kind of the same, really, outside of on the TSI, making sure that you got a new timing chain tensioner, the latest revision. The upgrades are going to be the same. You want to go faster, you put an intake, exhaust, a tune, a bigger turbo, bigger intercooler. It really all depends on what your goals are for the vehicle. If you just want straight horsepower, the modifications, while the components are going to be a little bit different. So if you buy an intake for the FSI and you buy an intake for the TSI, they might be a little bit different. If you buy an exhaust, it might be a little bit different, but it's still going to be the same thing. You're still going to put an intake on. You're still going to put an exhaust on. When it comes to fixes, I already mentioned the timing chain tensioner on the TSI. That's like the big one. Also water pump failures, oil leaks. In fact, I think I've done a video on all the failures of the TSI engine. When we go back to the BPYs, there were a lot of issues too. High pressure fuel pump and camshafts were the big one. The lobe would wear down on the intake cam, and that would cause the follower and high pressure fuel pump to fail, causing all kinds of concerns. I've actually seen engines totaled because of that kind of issue. For the most part on that one, when it was severe engine damage, it was actually, in addition to a wearing, failing part, it was actually also lack of maintenance on a lot of those. You could see where oil changes hadn't been done on the engine in the proper way or at the proper mileage. So Ian, great question. I'm gonna link up a couple videos for you to check out where we go quite a bit more in depth on those 2 engines. All right, next one comes from Becky. I have a 2010 Jetta TDI and my radio went dead the other day. Prior to suddenly dying, there was a pop sound, then nothing. I've searched the internet only to find that it seems to be a common problem with the 2010 Jettas, and there is no fix except to replace the radio at the tune of anywhere from $600 to $1,000. Just paid it off, and now this is on top of the emissions issue. Is there really no way of fixing this? The radio is a stock radio CD player, does not have navigation. Bluetooth light is still on. I've heard that the code can be reset using VAGCOM. I've also read that the battery cables need to be scrubbed with a wire brush where it attaches to the chassis. These were all pretty dated. Any new ideas? Is there a way to reset the radio? I read something about that too. Of course, I checked fuses and they all look fine. I've also recently had a new battery installed. I would really appreciate any advice you can give. All right, Becky, great question. We have a 2010 Jetta with the radio that is completely dead. It won't turn on at all. Here is my diagnostic process for fixing this issue. First of all, obviously we verify that the radio is not working. Second, what I do is I don't check any fuses. I actually take the radio out of the car and check the fuse on the back of the radio. Sometimes it's blown, sometimes it's not blown. Then what I do is I'll pull that fuse out, wait about 10 seconds, and I'll put the fuse back in and plug the radio back into the car. Don't install it back in the car, just simply plug it in. If the radio works, we're probably good to go. If the radio doesn't work, odds are the radio is dead. Now, my next step is a luxury that a lot of people aren't going to have. I have a spare radio that's old that I'll plug into the car just to see if it powers on. If it powers on, I know 100% for sure that radio's toast. If it doesn't power on, now I'll start working backwards and diagnosing issues. Sometimes it takes a little longer than checking the fuses on the side for, the radio fuse. Most of the time that's faster to do than to check the fuses on the side. So it really all depends on what's going on. If the radio's straight dead, that's my approach. Can you reset the radio with VADCOM? No, there's really not much you can do with that radio with VADCOM as far as resetting it goes. You can go in and try and communicate with it and see, but really by the time you get all that set up, you could have pulled the radio out, pulled the fuse, put it back in just to see if it would work. At that point, you may want to hook up VADCOM, but that's not my first step. As far as cleaning grounds and things like that, it may help. I've never seen that issue cause a radio not to work. I'm not going to say that it's never happened, but that's not something that's really common. For the most part, Becky, in your situation, it's almost always, like almost every single time, going to be a dead radio. Good thing is we don't have to replace it with a factory radio. We don't have to spend $600 to $1,000 on a new Volkswagen radio. There's plenty of aftermarket radios that'll function incredibly well, that'll work with Bluetooth, that'll work with steering wheel controls. Heck, you could probably get a good navigation system as well in the car without having to spend $1,000. So, all right, next one comes from Peter. First, thanks for your informative channel DIY videos, your willingness to mentor and educate. Thanks, Peter, man, I really appreciate that. I've seen a few people on YouTube recording videos using Seafoam with a 1/4-inch hose and inflation needle and taking off the air temp sensor and running the engine for a few minutes, letting it sit, then running the car again. You see a large amount of smoke and they claim it cleans the backs of the valves, therefore delaying or eliminating the need to hard clean the intake. May I know what your thoughts are? Thank you again and keep up the great work. Peter, this is a great question. Peter linked a video. Not going to link the video because I really don't think that what the guy in the video was doing really does work. So we have Seafoam, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to inject this chemical into the airstream and clean the backs of the intake valves. We have 8 intake valves, right? 4 cylinders, 2 valves on the intake side per cylinder. As this liquid is pulled in, it doesn't clean all 4 cylinders. I've done experiments, I've used other chemicals, I've used a lot higher concentration chemicals than Seafoam, like the stuff you can only get when you're a dealer. And the best I've ever seen it do is streak the runners on cylinder 2 and cylinder 3. As that chemical is going into the engine, right, it doesn't go out like this and into 1 and 4. It basically goes straight down into 2 and 3. So in the way that people are using it, it's not cleaning all 4 cylinders. In fact, when you're aiming that, when you take that air intake sensor out, it's directly aiming at 2 and 3, right at 2 and 3. So the way the guy in the video is doing it, I really don't think it works. There's a couple of other things that we can try in order to get this to work. We can put it in the gas tank and that'll do a little bit to help to clean the tips of the injectors. It's not going to clean them like a manual cleaning will, but it can help. But in order to get the carbon off the backs of the intake valves, the best way to do it is to hard clean it like you mentioned. Take the intake off, scrub it out, let it soak. Whatever method makes you feel good, do that method. If you want to use a walnut blaster, that's the way that I think works the absolute best. Of course, it makes quite a mess, but you're not huffing hard chemicals while you're doing the job. So whatever way works best for you is the way that I think works best. Now with the Seafoam, I think what may be okay, maybe, is actually doing it as preventative. So every 10,000 miles maybe, but I still don't think that doing it the way in the video is going to be the best way to do it. We need to have that distributed throughout the 4 cylinders, not just pushed down into 2 and 3. Now, if you have the proof that this works, let's see it. I would love to be wrong on this because I would love to be able to say, yeah, at 10,000 miles, do this, and it will prevent a lot of carbon buildup. Unfortunately, I think most people wait till you already have the carbon buildup, and I don't think there's a way that that seafoam in that short amount of time is going to clean it. Plus, I really worry about injecting all that stuff and then shutting the engine off. What if there's, a puddle sitting on top of one of the cylinders, and now you're trying to compress liquid, which, as we know, doesn't compress. So if you have the results showing, you take the intake manifold off, you show your carbon, you run that seafoam treatment, you pull the intake manifold back off and show us again, I will gladly admit that I'm wrong. Unfortunately, I have not seen any videos that are showing that. This is more of a feel-good thing. I think it works. So I don't think it works. I've tried it with other chemicals and it didn't do anything other than streak a little bit on cylinder 2 and 3, nothing on 1, nothing on 4. I think Seafoam's a really good product. I just don't think it's going to work for what most people are trying to make it do in that situation. That's not to say that Seafoam doesn't work. That's not to say that on a car that's not direct injection, it has no merit. That's not saying that on doing it on a direct injection car has no merit. But for the purpose of what we're trying to do here, I don't think it's going to get it done. All right, we got time for one more. This one comes from Skylar. I'm an 18-year-old hoping to do automotive incline jobs on the side. What are the essential first steps, classes, tools, places, shops, opportunities, and people to start with? Also, where's the best place to find tools? And is flipping cars a profitable venture? If so, how do I know which ones to buy? Skylar, you got a lot of questions, man. Good job. So where to start? That really depends on what you want to do. You need to decide, what do I want to do in this industry? Do I want to be a dealership technician? Go to a dealership that has a Service Express program and try and get in there. Most dealerships are not going to hire you as a line technician with no experience. Do you want to just work on cars on the side for your buddies? Get your buddy's car and bring it over and start. Get the service manuals, get the repair manuals. Make sure you have all the information that you need in order to fix these cars. As far as buying tools, it really all depends. How many tools do you need? Do you need a box like this full of tools, or do you need a small box like my Sonic box, which is a great box to have? Everything's organized, super great organization. Do you need something like that? Most of the time you can get all that stuff online. You're going to have a hard time getting a tool truck to come to your house. The Snap-on guy is not going to roll up to your house for you to buy one screwdriver once a year. So we're going to need to look other places. Nothing wrong with Craftsman tools. Heck, there's nothing wrong with a lot of tools that are sold. And there's nothing wrong with buying tools on Amazon. I buy a ton of tools on Amazon. There's also a bunch of other websites that are really good depending on what you're trying to buy. The things I really like to focus on when I'm buying hand tools is lifetime warranty. You will break tools. I have broken tons of tools, like a crazy amount of tools. And had I had to replace those and pay for them out of my pocket, I would be a lot less happy to buy those tools a second time. In fact, I probably wouldn't buy those tools a second time, unless they were really cheap, but then I know what I'm getting into. So you want to look for lifetime warranty. You want to look for good quality stuff. There's name brands out there. Usually when you hear them, you recognize them. OTC is a really common brand for things like compression testers and ball joint tools and things like that. Ossenmacher, Snap-on, Matco, Craftsman, Autocraft, whatever. Buy what you can afford. You can always upgrade later. Now, the question on flipping cars is the one I was actually most interested in. So, is there a way to make money flipping cars? Yes. Can you do it regularly? Really depends. You have got to be very diligent on buying these cars, fixing them, or whatever they need, and flipping them. Sometimes you're going to crush it. Buy a car for $400, put a $500 into it, sell it for $4,000. Hey, you just won big time. That's not what happens most of the time. Usually it's buy a car for $1,200, end up putting $1,000 in it, selling it for $2,700. But even that, $500 is $500. We have to look at how much time it's going to take us to do that. If we have to sit on a car for 8 months to make $400, was that really worth it? I don't know. To me, probably not. But to me, I just don't have the kind of time to commit to that. Finding cars on Craigslist is awesome. Finding cars that customers just don't want anymore, fantastic. But you gotta, dude, on this one, you gotta work your butt off in order to make a good amount of money on these cars. As far as which ones to buy, I don't know. You're gonna have to decide that on each case-by-case basis. There's things that we can inspect, there's things that we look at to see whether the engine is good repair or the interior is in good repair. Has it had a water leak at some point and we need to worry about corroded modules and wirings? I will tell you, if you're not sure what you need to look at, you're not ready to get involved in flipping cars yet, because you got to have a really good eye and a really good nose to make sure that you're not buying something that's going to end up costing you more money than you'll ever imagine to make on it. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments about today's show, post it down in the comments section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and obviously right here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.